Georgie, I'm thinking of giving him $70,000 as a celebration gift. On a holiday afternoon. Right after my husband Cedric, who had met with his brother-in-law Georgie at our parents' house, returned home, he broached such an unexpected proposal. Georgie is set to marry soon, and Cedric wants to give him a celebration gift of $70,000. The sheer amount drained the color from my face. I was bewildered, unable to comprehend, but desperately shook my head. There's no way we can suddenly come up with such a lump sum of money, right? What? What are you talking about? We can do it. It'll be easy with Violet's inheritance, right? Cedric said, laughing without a hint of remorse. However, I was left speechless, my mouth agape. Why does Cedric know about my mom, Violet's inheritance? My mind went blank, and I couldn't come up with a rebuttal on the spot. Why would Cedric, instead of me, who lives under the same roof, go so far to support Georgie, who is already independent and has been for a long time? Don't joke about this. I managed to squeeze out, to which Cedric unapologetically replied. Georgie's wedding celebration should be grand. So, please prepare $70,000. I'm begging you. My name is Sissy, I'm 60. Currently, I live with my husband, Cedric, who is 2 years older than me. We have 2 sons, but they moved out when they landed jobs. Now, both are married and have their own families. Although I haven't seen my grandchildren yet, the sons and their wives occasionally visit us, and we have a good relationship without any mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflicts. Freed from parenting, it's now just life with my husband. We can't go out as actively as we did in our newlywed days due to our age, but we plan to live our retirement years leisurely together. However, there is one point that I have been dissatisfied with Cedric about. This dissatisfaction is not something that has surfaced recently but has been smoldering inside me since the beginning of our marriage. Cedric, whom I met at a party, was kind and had a good character from the first time I met him. That aspect hasn't changed even now. He has always been actively involved in housework and parenting. He's not a bad person, but there was just one big flaw. He always wants to show off. For that, he doesn't hesitate to spend money, no matter the amount. Cedric tends to act unexpectedly, wanting to be seen well by others around him. Even when our sons were starting to live independently. Remember, a man's living situation is important. He would spout some mysterious theory, choosing rental properties that they couldn't possibly afford to continue paying. Of course, I strongly opposed, and the sons agreed with me, and we somehow managed to avoid the issue at that time. Cedric's habit of spending money without thinking because of his show-off nature hasn't changed since he was young. Realizing early on that I couldn't leave the household finances to Cedric, I persuaded him right after our marriage and took over the management of our money. Thanks to that, we haven't suffered any significant losses. If only Cedric's show-off nature could be cured, I would have no complaints about living with him. But Cedric is already 62, and it's unlikely his personality will change now. Moreover, Cedric's earnings have never been good. He has worked at an electronics store for many years, but due to a lack of ambition, his salary has hardly changed even now that he is in his 60s. Our life cannot be considered affluent. Because Cedric's earnings are somewhat insufficient, I have been working part-time since we got married to help with our finances. Lately, between housework and part-time work, and now with Violet being hospitalized, I spend my days visiting her. Violet has been diagnosed with terminal cancer and has already been given her prognosis. She is now in a palliative care hospital, but her condition has been unstable lately, and I feel I need to prepare myself for what's coming. Then one day, while we were eating dinner together, speaking of which, Cedric started. Violet's condition isn't good, is it? Yes. I don't think she has much longer. It was rare for Cedric to bring up Violet. Because he wasn't her biological parent, Cedric didn't visit the hospital much, so even if he mentioned it out of concern, it didn't sit well with me. I couldn't help but think that if he really cared, he could at least show some willingness to visit the hospital together on a weekend. Georgie's been worried about Violet too. Georgie? Georgie is Cedric's brother, 17 years his junior. He's not married and currently lives alone in their family home, just a few minutes' walk from our place. Though their parents-in-law have passed away, Cedric, who has a good relationship with his much younger brother Georgie, seems to stop by the family home frequently. Cedric came home a bit late today, probably because he stopped to chat with Georgie at the family home. I don't interact much with Georgie, so I'm not privy to the details of their conversations, but I suppose Cedric needs his breaks too. Cedric has always looked after Georgie well, maintaining a close relationship even as they aged, which I've silently acknowledged. However, it felt odd that Georgie, with whom I barely interact, would be concerned about Violet, but I appreciated his compassion for her. A few days later, after finishing my part-time job, I received a phone call at home. The caller was from the palliative care hospital where Violet was staying. Feeling a sense of dread, I calmed my heart and listened. As I feared, the staff informed me that Violet had passed away. I see. Understood. I'll head there immediately, I said, trying to steady my trembling voice, then hung up and immediately went to the hospital. Though we had prepared for this moment since her prognosis was announced, the shock was still profound. Upon arriving at the hospital and seeing Violet, now peacefully asleep in old age, tears overflowed. Having seen her struggle recently with unstable conditions, the thought that she was finally at peace was my only consolation. Mom, you've worked hard. Amidst a mix of sadness and relief, I stumbled over my words as I spoke to Violet, saying my final goodbye. Even after Violet's funeral, I remained downcast for a while, but gradually regained my spirits with the support of Cedric and our sons. While dealing with Violet's belongings, cleaning up the family home, and handling various procedures, about a month passed. Today, being a holiday, Cedric went to the family home in the morning and wasn't around. I finished grocery shopping in the morning and was taking a break after vacuuming past noon. Glancing at the clock, it was almost 2 p.m. Just as I was thinking of relaxing a bit longer, I heard the front door open and Cedric returned. He seemed unusually cheerful. Did something good happen? I asked. Then, to my surprise, he said that Georgie was getting married. Georgie is finally getting married? That's great, congratulations! Georgie is now 45, not young anymore. Though we're not close, as his sister-in-law, I've been concerned about him. The woman he's marrying is Roseanne, someone he introduced us to 2 years ago. I recall she was 3 years younger than Georgie, and from our only meeting, she seemed gentle and kind. But, Sissy, I'm sorry to bring this up so soon after Violet's passing, but I genuinely felt happy, but Cedric's preface gave me a sense of foreboding. Whenever Cedric starts with "I'm sorry, but," it's never good news. Perhaps it's a wife's intuition after many years. I was afraid to hear what my husband would say next. I'm thinking of giving Georgie $70,000 as a celebration gift. I couldn't immediately grasp what Cedric was saying. Confused by the sudden and unexpected proposal, I desperately shook my head. How can we suddenly come up with such a large sum of money? What? What are you talking about? We can do it. It'll be easy with Violet's inheritance, right? Cedric said, laughing without any sign of guilt. However, I was left speechless, my mouth agape at his words. My mind went blank, and I couldn't come up with a quick rebuttal. From your mail and insurance policies, I figured out the amount. Even though you manage our finances, isn't it too much to keep the inheritance a secret from me? Cedric said, seemingly appalled. I hadn't mentioned it to Cedric, thinking it would lead to complications, but Violet had taken out cancer insurance and named me as the beneficiary. I'd like to think I inherited Violet's prudent nature. Despite my resolve to keep it a secret, Cedric seems to have spotted something in my mail. Moreover, it appears he looked up the insurance details from the health insurance card I gave him during tax adjustments. From there, he seems to have calculated the specific amount of $70,000, but in reality, due to insurance policies under Violet's name, the amount is actually much higher. The thought of Cedric knowing the true amount of the inheritance is terrifying. He would surely start making all sorts of demands. I vowed never to let that information slip and took a deep breath before glaring at Cedric. $70,000 for a celebration gift? I've never heard of such a thing. What on earth would you even use all that money for? I understand that weddings are expensive, but $70,000 for a wedding gift is absurd. As I pressed for answers in disbelief, Cedric began to speak without showing any sign of remorse. Apart from the wedding expenses, there's also the need for repairs to the family home. Georgie wants to renovate it as he gets married. Then there's greeting relatives, acquaintances, and coworkers. So, at least $70,000 is necessary. I understood where the money was supposed to go from Cedric's explanation. However, even considering that, $70,000 for 45-year-old Georgie is an unimaginable amount. And Cedric is planning to give that $70,000 to Georgie as if it were his own money. There's no way I could agree to that. Why would you go so far for Georgie, who is already independent, instead of me, who lives under the same roof? Don't joke. Why are you telling me this? Please, sissy. I've never been able to do much for Georgie, so I want his wedding gift to be grand. Even if he's your brother-in-law, there's no way we can just hand over such a large sum of money. Even as Cedric lowered his head, I stood firm in my position. Cedric showed no signs of backing down either, and the situation remained at a stalemate, only worsening the atmosphere. Just then, as if timed, the house doorbell rang. I had a premonition that something worse was about to happen, and such premonitions tend to be accurate at times like this. As expected, it was Georgie who came in without waiting to be greeted. He showed up with such perfect timing. Probably Cedric had informed him beforehand that we would be discussing this today. Georgie, can you explain what's going on? Before even offering congratulations on his marriage, I confronted Georgie. Cedric added nonchalantly, "We were just talking about you." Georgie laughed. Then it's perfect timing. I also wanted to talk about money. Saying that, Georgie placed a sheet of paper on the table. As I reluctantly checked it, it was a quotation with various estimates listed. While the calculations on the paper were correct, they were far from acceptable. Sissy, your parents' inheritance came in, right? We need to pay the venue next month. Can you prepare $70,000 in cash soon and bring it to our place? Georgie said, without showing any sign of apology. His attitude, taking it for granted that I would prepare the money, was exactly like Cedric's. It was baffling how he could so calmly ask me, with whom he barely interacts, for such a favor. All right then, please. I'm busy with wedding stuff, so I'll be heading back now. Wait, Georgie! I called out to Georgie, but he quickly grabbed the quotation and left as if fleeing. Right after the door closed, my legs gave out and I collapsed on the spot. Looking up weakly at Cedric, he seemed to be avoiding eye contact, turning his face away. I was left in shock and disbelief, lacking the energy to even speak with Cedric. Cedric didn't try to speak either, perhaps due to the awkwardness, and the room was filled with a heavy atmosphere. My trust in Cedric, who had been making plans behind my back, crumbled all at once during this time. No matter how much of a show-off he is, going to such lengths for his brother is absurd. The shock was so great that I was stunned and couldn't move for a while until I realized it had gotten dark outside and Cedric had turned on the room's light. When I checked the time, it was already past 6 in the evening. I should start preparing dinner, but I have no energy to move. Then, the house doorbell rang again. Who could it be at this time? Without the energy to greet them, I just lifted my head, and soon, hurried footsteps approached. The person who burst into the house, out of breath, was a woman. I stared at her familiar face for a moment and then realized. "You're Roseanne, aren't you?" This woman was Georgie's fiancée, Roseanne. I hadn't recognized her immediately since we'd only met once before, but there was no mistake. However, the calm and gentle impression I had of her looked terribly flustered now. "It's been a while. Actually, I have something to discuss." "What's the matter? Why are you in such a hurry?" As I stood up to ask, hurried footsteps sounded again from the hallway. The figure that appeared behind Roseanne was Georgie, who had just visited in the afternoon.
"Roseanne, wait! Calm down!"
Georgie, trying to soothe Roseanne, seemed much more frantic than in the afternoon. However, Roseanne occasionally glared at Georgie and turned to face me.
"I want to apologize for the money he demanded. I'm really sorry,"
Roseanne said, almost crying, and bowed deeply to me.
"What do you mean?"
As I asked, Georgie pulled Roseanne's arm up. "Sorry. Roseanne and I had a minor argument earlier. It's nothing to do with Sissy, so please don't worry about it." Georgie laughed, but his face was strained. "Georgie, we're about to have dinner, so please take Roseanne home for today." Cedric, who hadn't spoken a word since the afternoon, suddenly spoke up. "Dinner? I haven't even started preparing, and suddenly what is he talking about?" Roseanne, looking dissatisfied, glared at Cedric and shook off Georgie's arm. Then, turning to Georgie, she shouted,
"Cedric and you, neither of you made any effort, and yet you shamelessly planned to use someone else's inheritance for a celebration gift?"
At Roseanne's outcry, Cedric and Georgie both let out stunned voices simultaneously.
"Roseanne, what are you suddenly talking about?"
Ignoring the flustered brothers, Roseanne turned back to me with a pained expression and began to speak.
"We never planned to have a wedding ceremony,"
Roseanne stated clearly, but I couldn't grasp what she meant. According to her, they had agreed to marry quietly due to their mature age, without any plans for greetings or home renovations. Recently, Roseanne became suspicious of Georgie's extravagant spending and confronted him, learning that he had confessed to receiving money from us. Expecting to receive a large sum of $70,000 soon, Georgie had nearly exhausted his savings.
"So, Georgie, if we're not having a ceremony, what were you planning to use the $70,000 for?"
When I asked, Georgie immediately looked away.
"If you can't say, I could even sue you for fraud."
Threatening him made Georgie tremble and hesitantly turn towards me. Eventually, he confessed in a barely audible voice that he had a significant debt he intended to repay with my money. Roseanne, unaware of this debt, looked even colder towards Georgie. Feeling unbearable under his fiancée's gaze, Georgie started to make excuses.
"Cedric has debts too, and much larger than mine. Actually, it was Cedric who first suggested using Sissy's money to pay off our debts."
Georgie shouted as if he had lost it, pointing at Cedric. Like Roseanne, I was unaware of this fact. When exactly did he start accumulating debt? I have no idea how much the total amount is. Is what you just said true? As I pressed Cedric, he became flustered. Both brothers were sweating profusely, and from their reactions, I was convinced that my husband indeed had debts. The story about giving a celebration gift to his brother was a blatant lie. They were probably planning to split it between themselves. Not only did Cedric try to show off, but he also tried to deceive me. I couldn't take it anymore and finally reached my breaking point.
What are you brothers even doing?
It's said that you can see someone's true nature when money is involved, but I never imagined it would come to this. I recalled that just before Violet passed away, Cedric and his brother seemed overly concerned. Now I understand that they had been eyeing Violet's inheritance from that time. Though I had my grievances with Cedric, there was love, which is why we stayed together for so many years, but now I cannot see a future with him. I regretted not deciding to divorce him sooner. If I had, I wouldn't have been involved in this mess.
Always trying to show off. You never took the initiative to earn more money, did you? If you had debts, didn't you think to work harder?
I thought about it, but... Cedric's reply was vague. I sighed deeply, steeled myself, and glared at Cedric.
I don't want to have anything to do with people who demand money without making any effort. Get out now. I don't want to know anything about you brothers' debt problems.
I couldn't hold back any longer and yelled at the bewildered Cedric. Then Roseanne also glared at Georgie.
Georgie, I don't think I can go on with you. Let's pretend the marriage talk never happened. I'm glad I saw your true nature before we got married,
she declared, deciding to break up with him as well. Georgie tried to cling to Roseanne, but she wouldn't listen. Together, Roseanne and I kicked the deceitful brothers out of the house. Afterward, I filed for divorce immediately. The divorce was finalized, and I started living alone at this age. Cedric went back to live at his parents' house, and for a while, it seemed he lived with Georgie, but their penchant for showiness and lack of financial management led to accumulating debts, and they disappeared as if they had fled in the night. Even after the separation, it seemed their characters did not change. Without someone like me or Roseanne to hold them back, they probably became uncontrollable. Where they are and what they are doing now, I do not know, but I have no intention of getting involved with those brothers ever again. After decades of living together, I had no lingering feelings for Cedric. Moreover, after the divorce, my two sons started visiting home regularly, so I don't feel lonely. When I told my sons about the divorce, they were surprised at first but quickly understood, knowing their father's lifestyle. In fact, when I confided about the turmoil to my eldest son, "Mom, I'm sorry for all the trouble." Evan, he apologized. I'm grateful that my sons did not turn out like their father. Just the other day, Evan's wife had a baby boy. My long-awaited first grandchild. When Evan's family brought my grandson for the first visit, I presented them with baby clothes I had chosen with a friend.
I picked these out with a friend. They're a bit big for him now, but it'll be nice if he can wear them once he's grown a bit.
Thanks, Mom. We'll take good care of them. Seeing my son's smiles is the greatest joy for me. With a new family member, the rest of my life is sure to be richer. From now on, I want to live quietly, watching my grandson grow. I recently sold the family home that was in Violet's name, so that money is also with me. Combined with the insurance money, I have enough to live comfortably in my old age, but I continue to work part-time for a sense of purpose in life. Since the day of the turmoil, I've been in contact with Roseanne, who also has no idea where the two are.
We never want to deal with them again. Next time, I'll find someone better.
Roseanne and I sometimes have tea and chat at my house. Right.
I also want a boyfriend next time who has a sound sense of money and doesn't lie.
We joke and enjoy our days together. Roseanne also helped me choose the baby clothes I gifted my grandson. I hope to continue my friendship with Roseanne. You never know when a wonderful encounter will happen. With these thoughts, I've embarked on the second chapter of my life. Looking at your face makes me sick. I can't stand living with a monster anymore. You're getting off here. From inside the car, my mom's gaze bore down on me, icy cold. At 12, I was told by my parents we were moving, and they put me in the car. Then, about 30 minutes into the drive, I was dropped off alone on the side of the road. Why? Aren't we all moving together? Mom then looked at me like I was trash she couldn't stand, with utter disgust. Don't be stupid. I can't stand the thought of you in the same house. You're useless. Ugly. This is where we part ways. Goodbye. Mom slammed the car door shut. Dad, sitting in the driver's seat, just looked down at me, expressionless, saying nothing. This is terrible. Why? Dad. Mom. I collapsed to my knees on the side of the road, sobbing. Literally abandoned by my parents, I was overwhelmed by sadness and fear. As if a blizzard had stirred within my heart. My face bears a large burn scar. Since childhood, my parents would repeatedly scorn its ugliness. Never allowing me treatment, despising me as a monster, constantly complaining about my behavior for it. Yet, they were my only parents. They were the only ones I could rely on to live. And yet, they abandoned me, their daughter. Don't go. Dad. Mom. The car carrying my parents drove off mercilessly. No matter how much I cried out, my voice couldn't reach them anymore. On a road busy with cars, no one stopped for my cries of agony. Alone, amidst the sound of indifferent engines and concrete scenery, I felt utterly isolated. Am I a monster? Aren't monsters part of the family too? I continued to cry, trembling, hands on the ground. All that spread before me was dark despair. What kind of scars does being called a monster and denied dignity leave on a 12-year-old girl? Please, someone help me. Stunned, I curled up on the side of the wide road. And the next name that came out wasn't my parents. I'm not a monster. Help me, Grandma. My name is Sophia. I'm now 37, with 2 children. Raised by my dad, a corporate executive, and my mom, a homemaker, until I was 12. I have a large burn scar on my face. From an injury in my childhood, the details of which I don't fully remember. Only the memory of intense heat, pain, and crying out as everything turned red before my eyes. This scar made me the subject of constant stares and whispers, both in preschool and elementary school.
Creepy, ghost girl.
Boys would taunt, and since girls began showing interest in fashion and beauty from an early age, I was ostracized and gossiped about. Naturally, I had no friends, spending recesses alone, reading or studying. My parents explained this scar was due to my carelessness, falling in front of a stove. You've always been so careless. It's embarrassing for a girl to have such a monstrous face like yours, Mom would say when discussing the burn. Indeed, looking in the mirror, the red and black mottled skin looked painful. Thinking I could never enjoy fashion or makeup like other girls made me feel gloomy. But being continually rejected by my parents hurt much more than any self-deprecation. That's why you've grown up to be so gloomy, without a single friend. Remember the sports meet? You couldn't participate because no one wanted you on their team. No one wants to be friends with someone with your personality. Just like Mom, instead of encouraging me, she added insult to injury as I grappled with hurt and isolation. I was made to wear the same clothes until they were tattered, and every time I outgrew them, she would click her tongue in disapproval. Meals consisted of leftovers from Dad and Mom or expired deli items, carelessly placed on the floor, and I never ate with the family. Yet, Mom would often claim she was taking care of me. My dad was often absent due to his busy job, and when he was home, his demeanor was no different from Mom's. "Your face is truly disgusting. With a face like that, you'll never get married." Because of this, they never protected me. Being constantly rejected by my parents made me believe I was worthless. Ugly in appearance, dark in personality, and ignored by everyone. I felt I had no place at home or at school. Maybe there was no point in living at all. Broken-hearted, I shut myself in my room and immersed myself deeper into my books. The books I read were always borrowed from the school library, ranging from children's literature to biographies of great people, histories of various countries, and even books on unusual sciences. I had plenty of time to myself. Dad was an executive at his company, and he and Mom, being close, often went on trips together, funded by their ample wealth. Being disliked by my parents, I was never taken along, always left to house sit. During these times, I was usually left with Dad's grandma. Staying at Grandma's house felt much more comfortable than being at my own. She was the president of a health food company and lived in a spacious single-family home. She never spoke ill of my burn scars and treated me with respect as an individual. There was also a live-in housekeeper named Emily, who was always kind to me and played with me. When I talked about the books I had recently read, Emily would listen intently without showing any annoyance. If there was something difficult in the books, Grandma and Emily would explain it to me carefully, or sometimes we would research it together. They often helped me with my studies too.
"Sophia, are you reading such difficult books already? That's amazing."
"Sophia, you're really smart. Being intelligent is important in life. Let's continue to develop that." I had no place at home or school, but both Grandma and Emily always affirmed me. I only felt less alone when I was left at their house. However, I couldn't stay there forever. When my parents' trip was over, Mom would come to pick me up. Those moments were a bit scary for me. In front of Grandma, Mom would hide her true nature and thank her in a voice higher than usual. "I'm really sorry for always imposing. I don't know how to thank you enough for taking care of such a child for us." "Thank you, truly." After being sent off by Grandma and others, Mom's demeanor would change as soon as we were alone. Her face, previously plastered with a forced smile, would quickly turn to disdain towards me.
"Come on, let's go home."
Mom, carrying a bunch of fancy souvenirs from the trip, would yank my arm hard.
"Don't get too comfortable just because Grandma is kind to you. Even Grandma must find you disgusting. She probably finds it a hassle to deal with you. She's just putting up with it for us. Don't you dare take it for granted."
With those words, Mom glared at me. By the time I was dragged out the door, Grandma and Emily could no longer see what was happening. I was roughly pulled along and put back in the car to go home. Back home, the cycle of constant rejection resumed. I didn't have the courage to run away as a primary school student, so I endured everything except for the times I was left at Grandma's house. Then I turned 12 and reached 6th grade. Life didn't change. In fact, it got worse as the girls in my class became more aware of beauty standards. With my burn scars, I was even more ostracized and isolated than before. The harassment from the girls increased, with them saying mean things loudly enough for me to hear or hiding my belongings. Then one day, my parents suddenly announced we were moving. And it seemed the move was scheduled quite soon, as they immediately instructed me to start packing. I had few belongings, my clothes were minimal, and I read books borrowed from the school library, so my packed items barely filled one cardboard box. And then came the day of departure. A few days ago, snow had fallen, cooling down the entire town. I was in the car, heading to our new home with my parents. At that point, I hadn't been told where we were moving to. With various anxieties in my heart, I was swayed by the car. Then, about 10 minutes down the road, the car suddenly stopped and the door opened.
"You're getting off here,"
said my mom with an icy tone, sitting next to me.
"Wait, just me?"
I asked, taken aback. Sighing heavily, she then looked at me with disdain, as if I were mere trash. Among the parents of my classmates, my mom was known for her beauty and elegance. Despite the day's moving chaos, she was dressed in a floral dress, her makeup impeccable, and her long hair styled meticulously. The transformation of her lips, adorned in red lipstick, into a sneer of disgust was oddly terrifying to me as a child.
"How do you not understand? You're the only one getting out here. We're not taking you with us to the new place." "You're kidding me,"
I whispered in despair. Ignoring my protests, my mom pushed forcefully on my back, urging me out of the car.
"I can't stand living with a monster like you anymore.
You're useless and ugly."
"This is where we say goodbye, then?"
Her gaze from inside the car was as cold as ice. She then unilaterally slammed the car door shut. Sitting in the driver's seat, my dad looked down on me with a blank expression, silent. "How could you do this? Please don't go. Dad. Mom." I sobbed, collapsing to my knees on the road. Literally abandoned by my parents, the world in front of me turned pitch black, filled with sorrow and fear. The winter road felt cold, adding to the anxiety in my heart. Inside, a cold blizzard raged. Yet, the car carrying my parents mercilessly drove away. No matter how much I screamed after it, my voice could no longer reach. No one stopped for my cries of agony. I was utterly alone. Am I a monster? Aren't monsters part of a family? Kneeling on the ground, I continued to cry, shivering. Before me, only a vast expanse of utter despair spread out. How much of a scar does being called a monster and denied dignity leave on a 12-year-old girl? I'm not a monster. Please, somebody help me, Grandma. The name that came out was no longer that of my parents. Slowly standing up, my vision blurred by tears, I turned around. There stood the grand gate to my grandmother's house. That's right, my parents had abandoned me at my grandmother's doorstep. The moment I resolved to seek her help, the gate opened with a creak.
"Thought I heard a car and a girl's voice. Sophia, what in the world happened?"
Seeing my tear-streaked face, Grandma exclaimed in surprise. Tears fell from my eyes once again at the sight of her. These weren't tears of shock or despair. Seeing Grandma's face allowed me to cry in relief. Her wise and kind face melted the ice that had formed around my heart. I ran to Grandma and hugged her tightly. Grandma, I've been abandoned by Dad and Mom. They said they couldn't stand living with a monster anymore. That monsters aren't part of the family. I don't know what to do. I continued to cry in Grandma's arms. As I calmed down, still embracing me, Grandma said in a gentle voice, "What a thing to happen. You've had it tough, haven't you? It must have been lonely and scary, but you're safe now. It's good that they dropped you off here. I'll take care of you with all my love." I nodded, crying. "It's cold out here, let's go inside," she said, leading me into the house. The large house had many rooms, but I was always taken to the one Grandma used as a dining room. My body, chilled by the harsh winter wind, gradually warmed up. Grandma made me a warm and delicious soup and listened carefully as I told her everything. When I had finished speaking, Grandma's face was tight with anger and disbelief.
I always thought they were lazy and only interested in luxury, but I never imagined they would go so far as to abandon their own daughter.
Grandma continued, shaking her hand.
I hesitated to say this about my own son, but ever since they started leaving you with me to go on luxurious trips, I had my suspicions.
Sorry. I blurted out, apologizing instinctively. It's okay, dear. Having Sophia here is a joy for both me and Emily. We love talking to you.
But it bothered me that it was always just the two of them on these trips, not a family vacation. And when I saw the luxury items they brought back, I couldn't help but feel they were enjoying their lavish lifestyle at your expense.
After finishing her soup, Grandma looked at me and smiled, saying, "It's going to be all right.
I'll protect you. And as for them, they'll get what they deserve for abandoning Sophia. Rest easy now, you're safe here with us."
Thank you, Grandma. I'm grateful, I said. Then Emily arrived. After Grandma explained the situation to her, they began to prepare a meal together for the three of us. The meat was juicy, the salad was filled with fresh vegetables. With delicious soup and a variety of other dishes, it was a feast that filled both body and soul.
To welcome Sophia, let's have a party.
With a beaming smile, Grandma spoke. The three of us quickly passed the time enjoying our meal. After dinner, Grandma sat me down for a serious talk. It was about the burn on my face. I had been told by my mom that it was my fault for being careless and bumping into the stove when I was little. However, the truth Grandma told was completely different. My dad, currently an executive at a subsidiary of Grandma's company, was vice president at the headquarters back then. However, his performance and attitude towards employees became a problem, leading to his demotion. Though he took an executive position at the subsidiary, his salary significantly decreased compared to what it was when he was a potential president. This led to an argument with my mom after she found out. Upset that they could no longer live luxuriously, my mom became furious, and the argument escalated. In an attempt to push my dad, my mom's arm hit me, and I was pushed into the stove face first with great force. That was the real story behind my burn. It wasn't my carelessness, but my parents' fault. And my mom lied to me to protect herself, continuously insulting me about the scar as if I were an outlet for her stress. That's awful, I said.
Yes, it is. I debated whether to tell you, given your age, but considering your situation, I felt responsible for staying silent. So, I thought it was time to tell you, Grandma explained.
Thank you for telling me, I replied. My feelings towards my parents shifted from fear to anger. I longed to prove them wrong someday. What could I do? My studies were all I had, but Grandma once told me my intelligence could be my weapon. I resolved to focus more on my studies than ever before, determined to get back at my parents. And then, in the blink of an eye, 25 years passed. I followed through with my resolve, and Grandma supported me through college. She also took me to the hospital for treatment of my burn scar. After years of treatment, the scar had faded significantly and became less noticeable as an adult. With makeup, it could be hidden well. During this time, Grandma's house underwent significant renovations and expansions, growing to a size of 990 square meters. The housekeeper changed a few times due to personal reasons, and now Madison was helping with household chores. The year I turned 37, Grandma passed away. At the age of 95. Her health had gradually declined after turning 80, and she passed away peacefully in a hospital after several admissions. Though I grieved for Grandma, who had done so much for me, I had no regrets. I learned many things from her. and vowed to treasure these lessons as I continued with my life. As for my parents, they never once reached out to me. We didn't know each other's contact information, and they never appeared at Grandma's house. Effectively, 25 years had passed in estrangement. Even when Grandma was ill and after her passing, my dad, her son, never showed up. Disgusted at how he could neglect his family to such an extent, I handled all the hospital formalities and funeral arrangements since I had lived with her for so long. The large house felt empty with only me and Madison left. Continuing to work hard, the same year Grandma died, an unexpected visitor came to the house. "What's happening with Mom's inheritance?" The person asking as he entered was my dad, whom I hadn't seen in 25 years. Mom was behind him. Both had aged, but their spiteful gaze remained unchanged. Behind them stood Madison, looking troubled, having let them through the gate to the front door. After 25 years without a word exchanged, and not even attending the funeral, why come now? As I wondered, Mom looked me over with a calculating gaze and said mockingly,
"Oh? That monster girl has finally become a human."
She must have been referring to my face. Hearing that, anger boiled inside me. I knew whose fault it was for my appearance. Mom had no right to mock my face. As I glared at them, Dad, seemingly impatient, began pacing and surveying the house as if appraising it. "Ah, remodeled, I see. Turned into a fine house. This means there's hope for the inheritance." With those words, I understood their motive. Having learned of Grandma's passing, they were after the inheritance of Grandma, who had been the president of the company.
"You came for the inheritance? After leaving me behind and not contacting me for 25 years. You didn't even come to Grandma's funeral."
My reply turned increasingly angry. Unforgivable. I could never accept it. We had no choice. We were on a trip during the funeral. Besides, I'm her son, so I should inherit, right? We got no contact, so we came ourselves. Irritated by his presumptuous tone, I silently went to fetch a debit card. I didn't want to let my parents into the house. I didn't want their dirty feet trampling over the precious place where Grandma and I had spent our time. Returning to the entrance, I handed them the debit card as demanded. Their greedy smiles at the sight of a large sum of cash were truly revolting. But that expression lasted only a moment, as their faces turned pale upon seeing the debit card and its balance.
"What? This is all there is? You're lying, right?"
Dad raised his voice, expressing his displeasure. "It's not a lie. This is all of Grandma's savings."
"You know Mom was the president of the company. It's impossible for someone like her to have only this much saved. There must be another bank account hidden. Hurry up and hand it over."
Dad stormed into the house, ignoring my attempts to stop him. He quickly found the cabinet where valuables were stored and began searching through drawers for other debit cards.
"There's nothing. No other debit cards anywhere. I told you there's none. If you understand, then stop rummaging through the house."
Grandma had consolidated her bank accounts into one, so there really were no hidden accounts. No matter how much they searched, they wouldn't find anything else. Dad clicked his tongue loudly, and Mom hysterically raised her voice.
"What's the point then? We came all this way because they say you have to claim your inheritance within a year."
"That's right. Even if there's no cash, we have this house. It's huge, so this house is ours now, right?" Dad looked at me with a smug grin, as if he had come up with a brilliant idea. "Sorry, but that's not possible. When I turned 18, Grandma changed the house's title to my name. The remodeling was done then, too. It's been over 10 years, so it can't be considered for the compulsory portion of the inheritance. Hearing this, Dad's face turned beet red. Mom, equally infuriated, screamed with her eyes bulging.
What is this? What's going on? Why does it belong to you? A monster shouldn't be receiving anything.
Mom's shrieking figure somehow looked pitiful to me now. Amidst the swirl of old frustrations and anger, I felt a chill at the core of my head. Taking a breath, I calmly told Mom,
I've always wanted to say this, but I am not a monster. I'm a human being. There's no reason for Mom and Dad, who only think about their luxuries, to insult me. I also know from Grandma why I bumped into the stove.
At that moment, Mom, eyes wide, lunged at me.
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! How dare you speak like that?
Mom grabbed me by the collar, startling me momentarily.
It's your fault for being there in the first place. That's why you're worthless. That's why you're a monster. There's nothing wrong with that.
She hurled every insult she could think of at me, shaking my collar repeatedly. After a struggle, with Madison's help, I managed to break free from her grasp. From a distance, Dad's voice could be heard.
But there must be other assets, right? Like jewelry, valuable dishes, and such.
Saying this, Dad began rummaging through another cabinet. Mom glanced at me menacingly for a moment before following Dad. Then, they ravaged Grandma's meticulously kept rooms out of greed. The living room, guest room, kitchen, everything was disrupted, drawers were pulled out violently, and items scattered on the floor and tables were knocked over. The sight of Grandma's beautiful home being destroyed was too much, and I screamed out.
Stop! Don't touch that! Shut up! It's none of your business.
Mom snapped, searching through a closet. Dad barged into another room, continuing the chaos.
Please stop! I'm calling the police! I pleaded. Go ahead and call.
Dad taunted, so I, without hesitation, called the police with Madison's help. Given my known profession, the responding officers arrived quickly upon hearing of the intrusion. 2 sturdy policemen soon subdued Dad and Mom.
Stop! I'm the son of this house. We just asked our daughter to let us in for a bit.
They tried to excuse themselves while attempting to escape, but they were no match for the strong officers and were dragged outside. After the storm passed, I collapsed in the hallway. Madison apologized for letting them in, but I reassured her it wasn't her fault. After catching my breath, I began cleaning up the mess they made. When I turned 18, Grandma, hoping for my future, transferred the house and all her assets to me as a living gift. Noticing my intellect, she saw potential for me to take over the company as an entrepreneur. Already advanced in age, Grandma thought about having me take over the company in the future. At the same time, she wanted to sever ties with Dad and Mom, who abandoned me and, despite being executives, did not do their jobs properly and seemed intent on ruining the company. Thus, she had been preparing little by little so that most of her estate would pass to me after her death. Grandma taught me not only school subjects but also about arts, world cultures, knowledge of economics, the demeanor of a professional, and how to behave as a business owner. To me, this knowledge was more valuable than any house or money. She always taught me this. Money is very important, but people are even more so. Money is necessary for the world and the company. But the people who work for the company and the customers are even more important. Those who don't value people will never find happiness. Grandma repeated these teachings, and they were firmly engraved in my heart. And as promised, I took over her company. Now, I am the president of the company. Afterward, Dad and Mom contacted the house several times, inquiring about life insurance or the cash they thought should have been passed on to me, but their wishes were never fulfilled. Most of Grandma's estate had been used up for my tuition and the house renovations, and she had also made me the beneficiary of her life insurance. Thanks to the excellent lawyer and accountant she had introduced to me, who had served her for many years, Dad and Mom were always out-argued and had to back down. A few months later, it was decided that the subsidiary where Dad worked as an executive would be absorbed by the headquarters. The ongoing suspicions about performance reached a limit, making it difficult to continue operating as a subsidiary. Consequently, Dad's dismissal was decided. Not only had he failed to perform his duties and contributed to poor performance, but it was also discovered he had been embezzling company funds. This became a widespread issue, and it would be more accurate to say he was fired for misconduct. Since Mom was a housewife, their income disappeared with Dad's dismissal. Having spent lavishly on trips and luxury brands, they had no savings, and it was only a matter of time before they would struggle even for living expenses. At that time, tired from work, I received a call at home from an unknown number. Being the president of a company, it wasn't unusual to receive calls from unregistered numbers, so I answered without hesitation. "Hey, Sophia. It's me, your mom." The voice that came through was Mom's, who had hurled abuse at me for so long. I didn't want to hear that voice again and was about to hang up, but I stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. "How could you get Dad fired? I don't work, and I can't live like this. Are you going to take responsibility? We'll come to your house. You'll take care of us, right?" Hearing her move forward with such a convenient story, I was astounded. After all the disdain and the recent ransacking of the house, to now live together and expect support was beyond audacious. I cut her off immediately. "Wait, what are you talking about? That's not possible." Mom quickly soured. "What do you mean? I'm your parent. It's a child's duty to help when their parents are struggling. You're the president of a company, you're not short on money." I stood firm against such selfish reasoning. "I have no obligation to live with people who have badmouthed and abandoned me. I haven't forgotten what you've done. You're not my parents in any sense." After saying that, I ended the call and immediately blocked Mom's number. I was deeply dismayed and spent some time lost in thought. I remembered Mom's glamorous dresses and the fancy bags she brought back from trips. She had always lived according to her desires. I won't help now. Hoping nothing strange happens again, I fell asleep with a prayer. However, my prayer went unanswered. A few days later, my parents showed up at the house again. Unfortunately, it was Madison's day off, so there was no one to send them away. Since I responded to the doorbell, pretending not to be home wasn't an option. I had no choice but to go out. "How cruel of you to refuse to live with us," Mom said, distorting her face and spewing venom as soon as she saw me. Next to her, Dad, glaring at me, said roughly, "If we can't live here, then give us money. As a CEO who fired me, you must be earning well. Just give us $10,000 a month, starting with $10,000 right now." I felt dizzy from their audacity. I erased all expressions from my face and shook my head quietly. "I've said this before, but I have no obligation to give you anything. I don't even consider you as my parents, so please leave." As I tried to close the gate, Dad forcefully held it open. "Don't be stupid. We're telling you we can't live without money. $10,000 is just pocket change for you, right?" "I don't have such pocket change. Every amount of money must be valued. That's what Grandma taught me." Unlike my parents, who would spend as much as they earned, she taught me the value of money. Giving them money would not lead to prudent living on their part. Then, Mom started making a scene.
What's the point of bringing up someone who's already dead? Just give us the money. We won't move from here until you do.
With that, they crossed their arms and sat down right there. Having them squat there was a nuisance not only to me but to the neighbors as well. I quickly took out my mobile phone from my pocket and called the police. Just like before, the officers arrived quickly and detained my parents. This time, I asked for a restraining order against them. They were still ranting as they were taken away by the police, but now, it was truly none of my concern. I just wished they would find work and live on their own. They had to sell off most of their accumulated luxury goods and cars, living in a cheap, old apartment with the money from those sales. It seems both of them had accumulated debts from their spending habits. They had been counting on Grandma's inheritance, which they believed they would receive. Living in poverty with about $40,000 in debt each became their new reality. Mom, who had thrown a fit when Dad was demoted, couldn't stand the now unemployed and poor Dad, planning to divorce him because she had no use for a man without money. However, realizing she would still have to pay off her own debts even after divorce, Mom, who had been a housewife, withdrew the divorce and started working part-time, all the while looking down on Dad. The relationship that once seemed close enough for frequent trips together broke down, and their life together turned hostile. Every day, Mom would taunt the penniless Dad, leading to fruitless arguments, making them the neighborhood nuisances. A contact living near their apartment informed me that their spending habits hadn't changed. They spent their meager earnings from low-wage jobs on luxury goods and expensive meals, eventually being chased down by debt collectors. Recognized as problematic by the apartment manager, they fled as if running away. And their whereabouts after that are unknown to anyone. Dad and Mom, who had denied and abandoned their own daughter, were eventually forsaken by money and the world. As for me, continuing as president of the company Grandma left me, my business acumen is highly regarded by clients and employees alike. As a result, I've expanded the company by establishing subsidiaries nationwide, choosing competent personnel as presidents for each, and the company continues to grow. Money is very important, but people are even more so. I continue to uphold Grandma's teaching as my principle. Additionally, based on my own experiences, I started supporting activities for people struggling with burns, fire accidents, or injuries. Many company employees voluntarily supported the initiative, and as the activities spread through our website, the organization's operations have become busier. Though I didn't expect any personal relationships due to my busy work, I became personally involved with a male executive assistant who supported me during a busy period of business expansion, leading to a relationship. A few years later, we married and were blessed with 2 children. My precious children are treasures just by being there. I'm committed to raising them with love, ensuring they never suffer physical or emotional harm. Money is very important. But people are even more important. Surrounded by the company's employees, business partners, my husband, and our lovely children. I will live my life happily, never forgetting my gratitude and affection for these important people.